to learn the new way to sell your property for top dollar that other agents would not even envision to be able to tell you how. So before we get started, if you are interested to get a copy of the slides that I'm teaching from, or if you're interested to get an instant home valuation for your home, scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, or you can visit www.greetingsvirginia.com/home value request. That website again is www.greetingsvirginia.com/home value request. And when you do so, I'll give you an instant home valuation to let you know what your property's worth, but I'll go above and beyond that where I'll also record an economic overview where I'll help you understand what has happened over the last 36 months, what's happened over the last 12 months, what's predicted to be happening over the next 90 days, 6 months, 3 years, and help you understand what the market economics mean to you in a way that's simple and useful. So again, visit www.greetingsvirginia.com/home value request. What we're going to go through today is we're going to go through the 360-degree selling process. We're going to talk about smart fix-ups. We're going to talk about staging, pros and cons. Like, should I stage? You may be thinking that right now. And we're going to talk about how we're going to market your property, how we're going to prospect for buyers, and then we're going to discuss about advanced negotiation. So first thing that I want you to consider, so go ahead and write this down right now as you taking notes, is again, you should have a piece of paper and a pen, and go ahead and grab that right now. And I'm going to ask you some questions. So these questions are going to allow for you to really clearly understand what you should be considering. So first, why are you moving? Because understanding that, and of course, you probably already know the answer to that, right? But I'm going to invite for you to dig deep on that. Really, truly, what will it do for you when you move, when you're able to achieve, that next home of yours, whether it even be, maybe you're relocating to for a new job, or maybe you got something exciting, or maybe you're just, you got something that's not so exciting. Maybe it's a, split up from a spouse, or, downsizing, or whatever the case may be. But understanding why you're moving is going to be vital for you to consider. And then, what's important to you about achieving that. Now, as you understand, here's why I'm moving. I want you to consider what will it do for you to achieve those goals. And I want to also acknowledge that you probably right now are feeling a little bit of anxiety. If you're considering to sell your property, you're probably anxious. You're probably considering, like, what will happen if I go homeless? What happens if I sell the home, but then I can't find the next home that I'm going to buy? Or maybe what will happen if I find a buyer and, we go under contract and then we never go to closing because they decide not to move forward, something like that. Whatever your concern is right now, I'm going to invite for you to write those down, because when you write down those concerns, then we can be able to then address those concerns. And you may have some things going on right now that you may not even be aware of. You may have some things that are causing you a little bit of anxiety, that you're feeling the anxiety, but you've not yet labeled it. So I'm going to invite for you to, go ahead and just take a little bit of time. And why are you moving? What's important to you about that? And what are you truly afraid of? Now, you don't necessarily need to share that with me, but if you do, I can definitely help you more so, because the more information that you share with me, the better I can help you. So how soon do you need to make this move? Do you have any flexibility in regards to the timing of it? When should you list your home for sale? We're going to talk here in just a few minutes. We're going to talk to you about, like, how long it will take typically to be able to sell your property, how long it will take for the buyers to do their due diligence. But there's, in addition to, like, just the timetable of, for example, if it takes on average 30 days to find a buyer, and then another 30 days to be able to have the buyer do their due diligence, well, that's a total time of 60 days. Yet, you should also consider that the timing of the seasonal cycle will impact you either favorably or, may go against you as well. So these are the things that you may want to consider. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being extremely urgent, how motivated are you to sell this house? And again, be real, be transparent, be authentic. And again, the more that you share with me, the better I'd be able to help you, or with the agent that you hire. And even if you are super, super motivated, one of the things that I want you to understand is, as your fiduciary, my job, my obligation is to represent you and your interests, and to never share what your motivation is with another party. I mean, unless if that's what you want me to do and you direct me to do so. But certainly if you're motivated to sell and you really got to get going, I don't think we should be sharing that with the buyer, unless if you think otherwise, but I would advise against doing that. I want you to ask yourself the question, what will happen if I don't sell my home? And sort of walk your way through that. Envision, what would it be like if I'm still owning this home 6 months from now? I have a seller that hired me to help her, and we were successful, but it took us longer than what I was hoping to be able to do so, because she was in Northern Virginia here. She wanted to move to Florida, and she owned a property that was in a condominium that was slated to be able to be redeveloped, meaning that developers were going to come in, they were going to tear down all the condos, all the 80% of the condo owners that agreed to that, and they were going to put mid-rises there with retail use at the bottom. The challenge is this has been a project that's been pending for more than 10 years, and they still don't have a date of by when they're going to start. So what we had to do is we had to find a cash buyer, because no bank would touch it. So as a result of that, it took her longer to be able to be able to go through the process, which was unfortunate. But luckily, we asked the question up front, what would happen if you don't sell it? And we came up with a plan of, well, if I don't sell it, because I know it's going to be a struggle, then I'm going to give it X amount of time, and then I would consider to rent it. But either way, I'm moving to Florida. I'm done with Northern Virginia. It's too much of a hustle and bustle for me. It's time for me to chill and retire. So consider again, what would happen if you don't sell the property in the time that you want to sell it. And now you want to consider, like, what are the pros and the cons of my property? What are the things that I need to do to prepare it for sale? You probably don't know what those are, which is what I'm going to tell you about here in just a few minutes. But right now, there may be some obvious things to you. Now, I caution you to remember that the things that you consider to be able to do for improvements are going to be things such as things that are going to be emotional of an appeal. Okay, so what you have to understand is that the logic makes you think and emotion makes you act. Okay, so you want to situate yourself so that you can appeal to the emotion of a buyer. Because I had a seller once upon a time, they put $50,000 into the improvements of their house before I met with them. They replaced the HVAC, they replaced the roof, they replaced the hot water heater, none of which was in default. It was just all old. And guess what they didn't do? They didn't replace the 1950s pink bathroom. They didn't replace the 1950s outdated kitchen. They didn't do anything for the curb appeal. Unfortunately, they made all these improvements before I met with them, and they would have been better. They would have been in a better situation to have invested that money into the kitchen, the bath, the curb appeal, the things that will appeal to the emotions of a buyers. See, the seller of the home was an engineer, right? So he's thinking function. But what you have to understand is that, yes, it has to be functional. It has to work. But if you have the choice between replacing an aging component that's in the infrastructure of the property, or replacing that in the structure works, like the HVAC works, the hot water heater works, etc. Instead of replacing that, you would want to do the improvements that are going to appeal to the buyer's emotions. So think about that right now. Like, what's good with my home? What's not so good with my home? What do I need to do for repairs, etc.? And rate it right now. Rate it a scale of 1 to 10. And whatever number that you come up with, then ask yourself the question, what would it take to be able to improve that by 1 or 2 points? So maybe if you rate your home a 7 right now, then ask yourself the question, what would it take to get it to an 8 or a 9, or maybe even a 10? And we're just going to outline that right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do those improvements, but we want to sit there and we want to think about this in a way that's going to allow for you to think, to set yourself up for success. What updates have you done? How long ago have you done the updates? And just because you did the update doesn't mean that it's a new update. Oftentimes I meet with sellers and they'll say to me, in fact, I met with a guy yesterday and he says, okay, so it's got a new, what did he say? It's got a new kitchen. It's got new bathrooms, right? It's got a new roof. And that's what he said to me on the telephone. But when I go to the property and I'm looking at them, I'm like, okay, these are nice, but they don't look like they're brand new. And I said, well, how old's the kitchen? When did you do that? Oh, we did that in 2012, right? That was 11 years ago. So that's not really new. It's improved within, 11 years. But, from a homeowner, you may be thinking right now that you replaced the driveway, you did certain things, maybe replaced the windows, maybe replaced other things in the home or improved something. But really consider, like, when did you do that? Because that's going to be important. And I get it that your perspective is, okay, I replaced it 10 years ago, but you're thinking like that seems like 2 years ago and it's $40,000 at the time, right? Yeah, there's value to that, but it's not necessarily new. So just, again, we want to be objective in our approach here. And then you want to consider, do you own other real estate investments? The reason why you want to consider that is because for your taxes, there's different things that you're going to want to be aware of depending on your situation, depending on, what your other assets may be. So when we're looking at the value of the home, we're first looking at, okay, what's the property? And then we're going to compare your property to other homes. And I'll share a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. And then we're going to evaluate, like, what do we need to do to be able to get the biggest return? So these are the things that me as a professional helping you, the things that I will be considering. Now, when we go in there, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to do what's called smart fix-ups. And so what I mean by a smart fix-up is I mean that these are the things that when you invest $1 into it, is going to get you multiple dollars in a return. We want to be able to sell for top dollar. We want to be able to invest money, like I mentioned to you before, that's going to appeal to the emotions of a buyer. Typically, the best things to do to be able to improve your property is a fresh coat of paint. It's also better to consider to replace the flooring rather than, that same guy I met with yesterday. He told me, he says, well, the carpet in the master bedroom, and I didn't even get to see the master bedroom because his wife was in there and he didn't want me to let me in it. And so I don't even know what repair it's in, but he says, I want to just give a credit to the buyers, right? I don't want to actually replace it. Now, I let it slide when I was consulting him, right? Because I wanted to be able to earn his business. But as because I have fiduciary care to be able to represent him, I did have a conversation with him about it today. And I said, hey, look, yes, we could do the $5,000 credit, but it's only going to take $2,000, if that, $1,500 to replace it. And it's going to give you a much better appeal to be able to do so up front. Fortunately, I was able to coordinate the carpet people. They're going to be out there tomorrow to do a bid, and they already have it scheduled for Saturday, the day after tomorrow, to be able to replace it. So they're going to come through that. And when you have a good agent that has the resources that can be able to help you, then you'll be in a position to be so that you don't have to really worry about, like, okay, how am I going to find these vendors to do this? Am I going to go on Angie's List, or I guess it's called Angie now? Am I going to go on Nextdoor, or can I just rely on somebody who has the vendors, who has the resources? I've been doing this for 16 years. The vendors that I work with, Edward Nunes with Absolute Floors, who's going out there tomorrow, I've been referring business to him for the past 12 years, more than a decade. Okay, so this has been somebody that for 12 years, I have trusted him with my clients. Not a single time have I gotten a complaint. And if I did get a complaint, do you think that Edward would jump through hoops to be able to fix it if there was a complaint? I bet you he will, because you can leverage me, and that's what you should be considering, is leveraging somebody who can then take the relationship that they have. Now I'm friends with Edward, right? So it's not like I'm going to be a jerk with him, right? But if he doesn't take care of my clients, I'm not going to keep using him, okay? Because that doesn't benefit you. And so that's a way that you can benefit from using a top agent. So curb appeal is really going to be, the first thing that a buyer is going to come up to your property, and it's the first thing that's going to appeal to them. I've had listings in the past where the curb appeal looked more like the top photo here than the bottom photo, and when I reach out to the agent and say, "Hey, how'd the showing go?" The agent says, "You know what? We got up to the property and we just kept on driving. They didn't even want to go into it." Right. So some things that can probably be easy to consider that cost you really, almost no money, mulching the beds, trimming the trees, painting the exterior doors, actually going out to the front door and walking through it, as though if you were a buyer, because maybe you enter into your property from a side door or through the garage and you never even go in your front door. Well, guess what? They're not going to enter your home, enter your property through the garage. You're going to go through the front door. So make sure that there's not, bushes that are overgrown, across the sidewalks. Okay. So when you go through that, you're going to be looking, is it crowded? Are there weeds? Is it attractive, right? What needs to be maintained? And really some of the easiest things to do is just cut back all the trees. Remember, less is more. And if you can see the difference between those two photos, that's the same property before and after, and with a very, very little bit of investment into it and a good photo. So other types of landscaping that you could consider, you could maybe do some outdoor changes depending on a case-by-case basis. I'd really have to meet with you to be able to make that a recommendation. But ultimately, it's how does it feel? Okay, and not how does it feel to you, because you've been there forever. How does it feel to somebody who's never been to your home before? And you want to make sure that it's in good repair. There's things that you can do for easy fixes. I'm an investor. A lot of times I'll buy properties, I'll fix them up and resell them. It's a little bit expensive to replace a chain link fence with the nice white picket fence. It is worth the investment, but what's even worth a better investment is just spray paint it a flat black. I've done that tons of times, and you're talking like 3, 4, 5 cans of spray paint and a little bit of legwork. Just spray paint it, make sure it's maintained, make sure it's looking good. It's a great bang for a buck, right? So there's things that we can do with very, very, very minimal investment, right? So obviously, again, it'd be best to replace the chain link, but if you can't, we should spray paint it black if you just don't have the money at all. We want a carpet and paint. I already mentioned that to you. Other improvements, what color paint are you going to choose? You're going to want to choose a neutral paint. I've been into many, many homes with that nice bright neon orange or coral blue, right? Which is all great colors. I like those colors, but it doesn't mean it may be just unique to you. Okay, so what we want to consider is let's get a neutral color. The grayish is something that's been in for many, many years. It's sort of fading out, the grayish is, but it's still a good choice, because it's good and neutral. And if there's a room that is like in good repair, but maybe has a couple dings in it, maybe it's your dining room and the chair has been banging into the wall, what you could do is get a Mr. Clean Magic Erase marker, put a little water on it. You can get those scuffs out really simply, really easily. Again, it's better to paint, but I'm also giving you option B as well. If you're really, really on a budget, you should at the very least make sure that you're buffing out those scuffs. Look up and down your stairwells. If you have stairwells, there's oftentimes scuffs up and down there. And your kids' rooms, particularly, probably your kids' rooms probably absolutely need to be painted, most likely. I know my kids' room, I've got a 12-year-old daughter, and I just painted her room about 3 months ago. That was a fun couple weekends. But either way, it makes a difference for sure. So you're going to want to make sure, a lot of people, going back to that gentleman that I was talking to, that wanted to just, clean his carpet, really, truly replace the carpet. Don't just clean it. It's a very a small investment for you to consider. Paint, carpet, those are the biggest bangs for your buck of anything that you could possibly do. Now, things that may cost you a little bit more money. Remember, I told you about that property where they put the 50 grand into a new roof and the HVAC, etc. If you've got some money to invest into it, and if it makes sense, and it may not make sense, this is where you need a professional to sort of guide you and sort of help you to evaluate. But if it does make sense, bathrooms and kitchen would be some things to consider. So what would you do in the bathrooms? Well, you could, let's say you have, so where we are in Northern Virginia, particularly like Arlington, some areas of Alexandria, particularly, they have a lot of homes, maybe Virginia Hills, a lot of homes that have that pink bathtub, the pink tile. Now in Arlington, you could sort of get away with it because it's Arlington. You can get away with anything, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? Virginia Hills and Alexander, you're going to probably want to do something. But what's the cheap way to do it? You could glaze that bathtub rather than replace it. And so about $450. It depends, on who we can get for you. They can come out, they can glaze it, they can make it look really, really good, and it looks brand new. The vanity, the toilet, these are things that you can replace relatively inexpensively. Fixtures can be done relatively inexpensively, and the floors, sometimes that's a little bit more expensive depending on what you're dealing with, right? But at the very least, you can put a small amount of money into painting it, replacing the vanities, replacing the fixtures, and maybe even the toilet. And then you could paint the glaze the toilet, the bathtub rather. And for maybe $1,500, you've got yourself almost a brand new bathroom. So that's an option, right? So there's ways that we can do this that cost you less money than others. Now, if you look at this next slide, to be able to get it from that left one, the before, to the right one, to the after, that's a little bit more of a detailed renovation. That's going to cost you more than $1,500 for sure. But there's ways that we can mitigate the cost. Kitchens. So I talked to you about, bathrooms, kitchens. These are bigger things that you can do. Kitchens is something that you can, there's times that maybe, we've done kitchens in smaller condominiums where we've had a contractor go through and paint the cabinets and put on fixtures, little doorknobs on there. That's a way that you can improve it. New appliances, that's a little bit more expensive, depending on the quality of the appliances that you get, but it may be worth it, right? At the very least, if you've got older aged appliances, it may be a good idea to consider that. Again, I'm sharing with you ideas right now on improvements. Do you have to do any of this? No, you don't have to do any of this. So I don't want you to freak out thinking like, man, I can't do any of that. I'm just giving you suggestions, and I'm hopefully communicating in a way that you understand that you have options. And it's really understanding that when you're smart, when you take the smart approach to this, then you're going to treat it like an investment. Not necessarily, I have a condominium in Alexandria where I'm helping her to renovate. She ended up deciding to stay in the property. Unfortunately, her husband had a stroke, God bless him, and he's really young too. He's like 55, and she has to take care of her husband, so she thought she was going to have to sell. And originally, when I went there, we went through. It was a pretty extensive thing, and I recommended it was going to be around $20,000 of improvements. But the $20,000 of improvements would have gotten her a $50,000 return. So a $30,000, well, it's $50,000 increase in price. So a $30,000 basically return on it. That's a good investment. I'll tell you what, if you ask me, hey, Dan, give me $20,000 and in 60 to 90 days, I'll give you back 50. Hey, I'm all in, as long as I can feel that the risk is relatively, safe. And of course, there's, risk in all of this, right? But, I'll help you to understand, particular to you, what the risk may be to you. But anyway, she ended up not selling. And now the contractor I introduced her to, she ended up hiring him, and they're doing $50,000 worth of work. And so I had a conversation with her last week. Her name's Hannah. I said, congratulations, that's great. I just want to make sure you're definitely not selling, because if you're selling, you may consider not to do that work, because it's not going to get you a return. In fact, you would probably end up losing money, right? The $50,000 is not going to get her 100,000 in return, right? Maybe it improves the value. There's definitely a threshold of how high we can improve the value because of what the competitors are selling for. You're not going to be able to sell for that much more than the highest price. So we want to be smart about the way we approach this. Now, Hannah's decided she and her husband are going to stay put indefinitely. And so if that's the case, then it makes sense that she does the 50,000 because she's not doing it to sell. She's doing it for what's important to her. So when you could consider, I mean, we could take a kitchen from something that is outdated to something that's enhanced. What you're looking at there is a pretty expensive renovation. I would say if your property, if the kitchen looks like the one on the left, I would find it almost impossible for me to recommend to make the improvement of what they have there on the right, because I don't think the investment would make sense. Maybe it does. Of course, everything's situational depending on your location, etc. So we'd really have to take a look. But really what you need to do that left kitchen there is you need to get it cleaned up. You need to get it clutter free. And you need to be able to make sure that, you're showcasing it. But I don't think that for the cost of improving it, that you're going to get that in a return. So one of the things that you may be thinking is like, well, what if I don't have the money? If you don't have the money, there's ways that we can help you. If you have equity in a house, we have a company that will loan you the money to do the improvements and get paid back at the closing table. Now there is an interest rate that's associated with that, and the interest rate depends on your credit, et cetera, and the amount of money that you're borrowing. But there are ways that I can help you that you can, get into this as much as zero today, do the improvements. I can introduce you to the contractors. Again, these are vetted people, been working with them for years. They can come in, they can do the improvements, they can help you, and they can rock and roll. You could also maybe, if you again have equity in the house and it may be a better interest rate, if you can get a HELOC. Sometimes you're not able to get HELOCs today. I mean, the lending industry has changed. In the past, getting a HELOC, a line of credit, excuse me, I shouldn't use lingo, but getting a line of credit was something that was definitely an option. It may or may not be an option to you, but a line of credit basically works sort of like a credit card that's secured with your property. So they'll say, you got a $35,000 line of credit. You can use that money any way you want. You pay it back, it goes down to zero. You can pull back out on it again. But again, not a lot of banks are doing that, or at least not as many as years in the past. Now, let's talk about staging. So I already mentioned to you when I was showing you that kitchen about the decluttering. When you're selling, you want to think less is more. If you've ever been in a new home before, like the builder's new home model home, what you notice, and if you can remember that right now, is when you walk through that new home build, what you remember is that the home was designed with small furniture, with sparsely decorated walls, with just a few, items hanging up on the walls, and some, plants and maybe the, plants that are in the plastic plants, that type of stuff. Nice made bed. This is the way that the home looks like. So if we can do that with your home, then maybe staging isn't going to be necessary. If you have a vacant property, you should consider at least a light staging. That's a part of the services that my company provides. It's a part of, you're not paying extra for that. We'll help you provide you with a light staging, which is just, what it is. It's the light staging. So we'll make sure that there's towels in the bathroom. We'll make sure that there's toilet paper in the bathroom. We'll make sure that there's some carpets, that are breaking up the rooms. You wouldn't, put a Miss Pac-Man in the back corner, right? But you may put a chair in the back corner. Maybe, for example, like this, you can't really see it, but there's a bar stool right there. That could be something nice to put in the corner to sort of break up the area. So it's better to be like a sparsely decorated home is going to break it up so that it's, again, all about the emotion. Because you don't want to be showing a vacant home. Now, if you want to be able to even increase the value, but it's going to be a larger investment, then you would want to invest into staging. So that's where we'll get the interior decorator from our organization, come out, take a look at it, make the recommendations. It would be an additional cost to you, but it's really not a cost, it's more than an investment. It's just, and it's an investment that will make a return, by the way, as well. I have sellers all the time that say, hey, Dan, that it's all BS. It doesn't work. I understand that. It's completely logical, which is the point. Remember, logic makes you think, emotion makes you act. Okay. The emotions of the buyer are what going to cause them to take action. And so it really does work. In fact, for you logical creatures, I can prove it scientifically because I can show you properties that were listed with other agents, not staged, not sold, properties that were listed and sold by me that were staged, and we ended up getting a higher price and selling it. Remember, the previous agent couldn't even sell it at a lower price. And I could show you, say they put $4,000 into this, they got $15,000 in return for a listing that couldn't sell otherwise. Okay, so we do have the data for those of you that want to approach this logically. I respect you very much. What are some of the mistakes that you could make for in staging? The lack of curb appeal. Again, we've already talked about that. The absence of understanding what the staging does, right? So it's my job to be able to advise you about the process. And again, having the resources for the professional to introduce you to, and then not having a well planned campaign, right? We want to make sure that we are coming at this in a way that we're approaching it with a plan. So let's talk about the psychology of purchasing. Okay, so we want to move the buyers towards pleasure. We want to appeal to them. We want to move them away from pain. And what's the pain in the marketplace right now? Well, the perceived pain is the affordability. I'll talk to you more about that here in a few moments. Deferred maintenance is something that we want to make sure that we take care of, because those are the things that the buyer is going to be concerned about. We want to recognize, what is a buyer going to think about? That's when you bought the home, that's what you were thinking about. You got to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer, not because you have to care for them. I mean, good people care for each other, right? But ultimately, it puts you in the better spot. So it's not about the buyer, it's about you. Because when you can understand what they're going through and accommodate those concerns, such as taking care of any deferred maintenance, et cetera, then you'll be able to allow for them to make a buying decision easier. So we want to make sure that we put their subconscious to work, right? We want to make sure that in the marketing, we're using smart languaging. All right. We want to call it a home to the buyer. Okay. We don't want to say, come look at this listing, come look at this property. Instead, we want to use persuasive languaging, such as, come visit this home that has been carefully crafted to appeal to you and your needs. This smart languaging to be able to let them feel like, man, I want to freaking live there. All right. That's just a small little segment, right? We want to remove the speed bumps, and we want to be able to create desire. Okay. So understanding that, a speed bump, going back to, that chain link fence, right? If you take a look at this photo, you can see where I mentioned to you, the white picket fence is going to be a little more expensive, but it will be, a speed bump is a chain link fence. We can remove that to be able to create desire, to be able to create momentum. The timing of the listing, well, I'm opening up my in-ground pool this week, right? I was just out there earlier today before I started to present this to you. And the best time to list a property, if you have a pool, is going to be when it's hot. The worst time to list a home is going to be when it's cold, for a home with a pool in it, right? So you're going to understand that there are certain times throughout the year that the market does different things. January, February are slower months in the year. And if you consider it, it's basically like August is the most amount of homes that are sold throughout the entire year. But understand, August, if this represents August, is listings that happen in June. So the most sales happen in August. Okay. But remember, there's a 30-day cycle for the buyers to do their due diligence, and another 30-day cycle for me to find that buyer for you. So there's a 30, so the most amount of homes are sold in August. This would be July. This would be June. And so June, what we find is the most activity. Does that mean it's the best month of the year to sell? No, because it's all proportionate. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to look at what's the times of the year where there's a proportion of more buyers than sellers. It's not just more transactions. Interesting enough, guess what month that is? January. When the least amount of homes are sold in the year, the biggest difference between buyers and sellers exists, and you have the least amount of competition. So these are some of the things that you could consider, and depending on the timing of the year when we get together, I'll be able to help you understand, what that means to you. I want to share with you some information about what's going on here in the area. So what I want to do is I want to be able to talk to you about like what's going on here in the marketplace in the Mid-Atlantic area, as well as in Northern Virginia and Maryland, so that you can understand from a global perspective, from a generalized perspective of what the market is doing. And of course, wherever you're located, it's going to be different because it's a more micro, it's a more of a micro economy. All right. So in the Mid-Atlantic area, what do you notice here? So remember, I told you January is the least amount of homes that are sold, and February, March, that's when the market starts to begin. Once the April numbers come out, you're going to see the April numbers coming up. So we literally, in this moment, we are in a time that that the market is starting to become active. Here in Northern Virginia, you could notice that there are 40% less homes on the market than a year ago. Okay, and there's 26% more homes that remain on the market. So what does that mean to you? It means to you that there's going to be more days on the market. And you can see that over here where it says the average days on the market. But guess what? The average days on the market year over year have doubled. Oh my goodness, that's horrific. They doubled from 12 to 22. I remember a time when there was an average days on the market of 4 to 6 months. Okay, so 22 days it's going to take us on average. Now, if you're in Alexandria, it's going to be different than if you're in Woodbridge. It's going to be different than you're in Reston, etc. It's all going to slightly change, but across the region, and at least in Northern Virginia, that's the averages. When you look at Montgomery County, then you're going to see that that's pretty much the same, 27 days on the market. The new listings over here, 38% less, same type of deal. So really, ultimately, the less activity is only going to cause for us, for a increase in time on the market. But even with that increase on the time on the market, it's still reasonable. The other things to notate is last week I listed and sold 2 homes, both over list price, both with multiple offers. Right now, if you were a seller, it's time to list. Right now, the market is shifting. I already showed you how, January, February, how it was moving up, but literally like underneath of our feet, what you don't see in these data, because the data is collected in a slower pattern, is what you don't see is that literally right now, the market is popping and it is a good time to sell. Prince George's County, pretty much the same numbers, 32% less activity year over year. They're cresting over a month in marketing time, but it's still something that's relatively reasonable. Now, what type of home do you have? What type of property do you have is going to, again, dictate on what the demand versus the what the demand index is. So what the home demand index is taking a look at what I just said to you, the difference between buyers and sellers. And again, this is trailing data. This is about maybe 30 days to 45 days old. So if you've got a single family home here in the area below 513, it's a slow market. Okay. But guess what? If you have a $1.2 million property, it's a steady market. Okay. And so right now, depending on the type of property, if you've got a condo below 560, it's a steady market. Above 560, it's a hot market. Okay. So depending on, on where you are and depending on the type of property that you have, it goes from everywhere from, still a slow market to a fast paced market. How would you know what your scenario is? At the end of this slides, I'll give you some information, and you can put your property address in there. The URL I gave you earlier, I can give you that information as well. All right, last two things to wrap this up with is number one is I want to talk to you about interest rates. Have you heard that interest rates have been increasing relatively recently? Well, they have. Here's the forecast over the next 90 days. So what do you notice about this chart? Oh my goodness, interest rates have increased dramatically. Well, that's got to impact me. It does. I'm being transparent with you, but it doesn't as much as you may think it does. And in the long run, it doesn't really at all because we're still better than average, which I'll show you that here in a second. But here's what you have to understand. The buyers have been sitting on the sidelines for around 6 months. The last 6 months has been the slowest 6 months that I've had in my real estate sales career. The buyers who want to buy are ready to buy right now. Interest rates have not been a conversation that I've had with buyers. They're not bringing it up. So I don't think that that's going to impact you as much as you may think it's going to impact you. But there's two good things. There's two good pieces of news with interest rates. Number one is you can see at that we're pretty much flatlining. And in fact, we're sort of going down just a little bit. Okay. We went up to as high as 7.25%. We're hovering around 6% right now. And guess what? The even better news is if you think about this in a historic manner, yeah, there's a big sharp increase here at the end there. It's going up, right? I think it's going to flatline right now. But what do you notice over the last, my lifetime, at least a little bit more than my lifetime. But what do you notice after, over the last 52 years? You notice that, hey, the average interest rate over the last 52 years is 7.75%. That's almost 2% higher than where it is today. So the consumer, the buyer is only considering, and maybe if you're a buyer, maybe you're, if you're thinking to sell and buy, maybe you're thinking, oh my goodness, interest rates suck. Well, do they? They suck compared to 2 years ago, which was an anomaly in the marketplace. Never happened that low before. And all the time that money's been being lent, it's never been that low, and it will never be that low again. So if you're waiting on the sidelines, it's not going to come back. I don't say too many things with certainty. I don't say too many things with a definitive, it will never happen again. That's the only thing I've ever said in my real estate career where I've said it won't happen again. You'll never hear me say, oh, this is a great deal. You gotta buy this because it's going to increase in price. Even if I believe that, I don't know that to be true. Okay. But I have certainty that it will never be at 2.25% ever again in our lifetimes at the very least. So if you are in the market, hopefully I've answered your questions today. Hopefully I have helped you today. And if you are in the market to sell your property, scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, or you can visit www.greetingsvirginia.com/home value request. That website again is www.greetingsvirginia.com/home value request. If you're a real estate agent and you're shadowing me today just to sort of figure out like how does somebody do a presentation like this, thank you for joining me. I do welcome you. And I do invite you to an upcoming listing challenge that I'm hosting, which is a 5-day listing challenge. It's a free class you can attend by visiting www.5daylistingchallenge.com. That's the number 5daylistingchallenge.com. And thank you so much for your attendance today. I hope that I've been useful. I hope that I've answered some of your questions. And if I could be a resource for you in any way, you got a family, you got a friend, you got a coworker. If they're looking for somebody with experience that can help explain this to them, I'm your guy. Feel free to introduce me to them. I promise when you do so, I will treat them like gold. I'll update you throughout the process, and I will make you look good. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance today. God bless, and I look forward to being a resource for you. Good night.